Hey, what's up, everybody? We're doing the podcast thing again. But today, we really like doing these because we get to bring in experts in different fields that we interact with all the time, different real estate related fields. And probably the number one most recommended thing by us for any buyer is get a home inspection and use a home inspector that is good, because there are a lot of home inspectors out there, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. A lot of home inspectors that straight up suck. But I met Andrew, it was 11 years ago at this point.
I think over a decade ago.
Yeah, at an open house where I actually met some of my favorite clients too. Shout out Verdettes. It was a good open house. And I've used you exclusively ever since then because Andrew is so freaking thorough. You've got, we'll let you tell us about your background, but like you did foreclosures for a long time and all sorts. You've seen some crazy stuff is what we're saying. But everybody, Andrew Jolley with JODA Home Inspections.
He's like the Big Lebowski's doctor. He's a good man and thorough.
Solid pull. But yeah, Andrew, real quick, give me like the elevator pitch on your experience.
Thank you for the intro. My name is Andrew. I own JODA Home Inspections. It's named after my kids, Josephine and Danny. That's where the name came from. But I've inspected for over 10 years. Before I inspected, I maintained foreclosures and saw a lot of crazy stuff doing that. But then for the last decade, I've inspected for buyers.
Yeah. And then you're part of, it's InterNACHI, right?
InterNACHI, yeah. So there's a couple main associations. There's InterNACHI and there's ASHI.
Yeah. So, and it's a big association that you like maintain standards and education, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. So the associations, they set the standard of practice. And so that's the minimum of what we have to inspect. And then there's a lot of things I'll do above that. Like I do infrared. That's not something required, but it's a helpful tool that I use. They set the standard of practice and then they do ongoing education.
Thanks. What does it take to become a home inspector? What qualifications do you have to have?
Sure. So there's certain classes that you have to take so first of all, until recently, there was no regulation in Utah. And so actually starting in 2026, it is required that you are a licensed home inspector, which is still a little up in the air in Utah. They're trying to figure out who is going to manage that. But they did come up with what the minimum qualification is in Utah. So you have to be certified with one of the two main associations, and then there's an insurance requirement now as well, which is good.
I didn't know that. Yeah, up until I didn't know that had been instituted. That's great.
It's only started a couple months ago, and they're not yet enforcing it, but soon they will be, and that'll be better for buyers, better for everyone, really.
Yeah, up until then, it was literally like I'm mechanically useless. That's why I'm in sales. I could go say I was a home inspector and just have no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, and there's a ton of really great contractors, but they don't necessarily have the same process to go through and inspect a home, or necessarily the software to put everything in a document so that it's useful to home buyers when you're negotiating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I noted like sometimes or most of the time with builders, they'll always say, okay, yes, you can have an outside inspector come in and check the place out, but they have to be insured. They have to be,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's cool that you're rolling that out.
Yeah. Speaking of builders, first of all, we recommend every single person get a home inspection, including new construction. And there's a reason for that. Like I saw your story yesterday, and we found stuff on new construction before. You did one for me. You had actually inspected this place for someone else, and I showed it the next day. And you were like, oh, yeah, no, I found that sewer line was completely full of rocks. That was in North Salt Lake. Yeah.
I remember that one.
Yeah. What kind of stuff do you typically find on like new construction?
So some of the bigger issues I found on new builds are sewer issues. And so that is one thing that I will recommend on every new build is that you get a sewer scope. But there was the one where they had graded around the foundation. And when they did it, they didn't have a cap on the sewer clean out. And so a bunch of gravel and rocks got put down the line. And so nobody had lived there yet. I did the sewer scope and hit a bunch of gravel. And the thing there is that when I'm running water will get through. But as soon as you start to put waste and flush toilets, that's going to get caught and it's going to back up. So it was fortunate for them that they opted for the sewer scope.
Yeah.
How do you clean that out?
I think they probably hydrojetted it and high pressure water, and it cleans out all the rocks and pushes it out to the city line, which is much bigger and can handle a little bit of gravel.
make it their problem.
Yeah, you
I like that.
hydrojetting. Hydrojetting isn't cheap. Like, had that fallen on the buyers, it's $700.
Yeah, and you only know after it backs up at that point.
Yeah, which then you have a much bigger problem.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit too. I know when a lot of my clients, when they hear, "Oh, inspection," when does the inspector come out? What is that for? What's due diligence? What's that? What happens if the house fails inspection? And I hear a lot of that kind of stuff. Who pays for the inspection? What's the inspection for? Who owns the inspection?
Sure. So the one thing you said is if the house fails, and that's a big misconception that a lot of people think it's pass or fail, and that's not necessarily the case. The inspection is for the buyer's good, and so I look for safety hazards. I go over potential maintenance problems and the life expectancy. You know, is the roof old? Is the furnace old? Are there plumbing leaks or things that have been recalled? And so it's not necessarily pass or fail. You can still buy a house that has a lot of problems. You might choose not to, but it's not that you're not going to be allowed to. And no one's going to require that these things be fixed. Mm-hmm. You can negotiate, and hopefully in your negotiations, you can either get some money towards these problems, or the homeowners can have contractors come in and fix some of the problems. But it's not necessarily pass or fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is a document that like doesn't go to the lender. It's literally for the buyer's information.
Yeah, sometimes I'll bring, like, okay, if you're going to go buy a used car, you can take it for a test drive and take it to a mechanic who's a third-party person, look the car over and let you know if they see any red flags. So that's something sometimes I'll tell buyers, like, okay, yeah, Andrew doesn't work for the city. This isn't something that the electric is gonna, and it's fine. There are people where it's like, it'll be their third house, and they'll be walking through like, will this even pass inspection when the inspector comes? And it's like,
yeah. Which with new construction, that is a thing.
Yeah.
Like you can call out things that maybe the city inspector missed, or the city inspector will notice before they give their certificate of occupation. But yeah, with standard homes, like this is just for buyers' information.
And that is a big difference. If you are getting permits, and let's say you own a home and you're remodeling something, you're required to get permits for a lot of those things. And then the city inspector comes, and the city inspector, that is pass or fail. If you're not following codes or you're making mistakes, they can require that you bring it up to code.
Awesome.
But that's just for new builds or additions.
Yep, or permitted work. That's right.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about your reports, they come in and you have a little icon. You're like, these things marked with this icon, these are safety hazards, and these are just maintenance options. And you just present it in a list that's easy for the buyers to understand, easy for me to look at and just be like, okay, these are some big red flags right here. We should probably get these fixed and address that before we finish due diligence.
Definitely. One thing I try to do in the inspection walkthrough is to put everything in perspective, because when I go through a house, I'll find a lot. Sometimes it's 60, 70, 80 items on older homes. And so I try to put it in perspective and say, these are the more important items. And the three categories that I kind of put them in are first safety hazards. And you want to address safety hazards so you're not living with them. Next are any moisture concerns. And so active leaks, downspout extensions, getting the water further away from the house, some moisture concerns. And the last are those bigger expenses. So things like older roofs, furnace that's on its last leg, sewer lines, things like that.
Yeah.
Polybutylene.
Yeah, polybutylene piping.
Yeah.
I mean, and Andrew, you're a stud. Like, I will literally send him pictures from inspections, be like, hey man, I think this is polybutylene piping. Can you reaffirm that? And it'll, within like 10 minutes always, you're super responsive.
Yeah. In the 80s and 90s, they would use this great pipe called polybutylene. And it was part of a big class action lawsuit. It was $1 billion class action lawsuit. And it's one of the worst types of pipe you can have. And so it's always something to be on the lookout for.
Yeah. So pro tip, if you're out looking at open houses or something and you see some great piping for plumbing and the house is built in the 80s or 90s, pretty good chance it's that.
Yeah.
And that's like, I mean, I've had clients repipe smaller houses before and it was $13,000. So when you get into a bigger house, it can be way more than that. And you're cutting into drywall. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
What's the most common thing you see? There are a couple that I tease you about, so I'm gonna.
Oh, sure. So one of the more common ones that I see are missing anti-tip brackets on stoves. And so stoves should have a bracket that it slides into so that it can't tip forward. That way, if you have something heavy on the shelf or kids around and they put weight on the door, it's not going to tip over on top of them. So they come from the manufacturer. You don't have to buy it separate, but it should be installed so it doesn't tip forward.
And it almost never is.
Yeah, it's a real common one. Yeah.
Our last two actually had them though.
Oh, really? That's impressive.
I know.
Yeah.
It's super weird. I didn't even get to tease him about it.
Yeah.
But ironically, the one house was in real poor condition. So
It was a straight up meth trailers. Yeah.
it literally was a meth trailer.
It was a meth trailer.
Yeah, and it had an anti-tip bracket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They went the extra mile.
It didn't have
At least they got
carpets.
that figured out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't have carpets or, like functioning heat, but it did have an anti-tip bracket.
Another one that you bring up a lot that is just that so many people don't realize, I didn't realize, was you always see these range hoods above, or the microwave fan or vent. And it's like, people just kind of assume, they're like, oh, these are the walls I live in. Like, everything gets taken care of out there in the right way. And can you tell me a little bit about microwave fans and range hoods?
You're not necessarily required to have a vent that vents outside from a kitchen. And so a lot of people assume they kick on the microwave vent or the vent hood and they assume it's going to move it outside. A lot of times, probably more times than not, that's just recirculating.
Yeah.
So there are little carbon filters and that'll help absorb some of the odors and oils, but it's not necessarily moving it outside.
Mm-hmm. And when's the last time anyone has ever changed one of those carbon filters?
Never.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. Okay, so what's like a general cost range for an inspection? I know.
Sure. So it starts at around $450 and then it goes up based on square footage and age. So the bigger the house is, the older the house is, it goes up a little bit in cost. And then there's a couple add-ons. So the 3 or say 4 bigger ones are a meth test, $135 for meth test, $135 for a radon test, and then $200 for a sewer scope. And then the last thing would be a mold test. And for an indoor air quality test or a mold test, I charge $285. So $450 to start. Usually end up somewhere $700 or $800 for an inspection based on your add-ons.
Yeah, but like easily the best money you spend.
Yeah.
A transaction.
That's what I tell people too. Or it's like on one hand, like you're like, well, what do we need to do to put in an offer? Like, how much does it cost? How much, whatever. It's like, well, it's all free until you buy the house, except for the inspection. You spend $1,000, and it's funny because you will have this offer out for $600, $700, $800, $900,000, and they're looking at the list of things on the inspection. What should I add? This? Should I add? Oh, I don't know. $200. It's like, you're getting ready to drop $800,000. Do you know what the sewer looks like?
Yeah.
And
yes, you do.
can
Yes.
save you $15,000.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm always of the opinion, like, don't try to skimp and save on the inspection. However, on the other hand, too, sometimes it puts into perspective, like, okay, like when you do put in an offer, like there are costs associated that are coming out of your pocket that aren't just sit down at the closing table and wrap it into your loan and the inspection as well.
100%. Which of those add-ons are the ones that you would recommend 100% of the time?
Always a sewer scope. Always a meth test. So even new construction, I would recommend getting a sewer scope. It's going to be a plastic line most of the time, which is going to be the best, but sometimes they're put in with bad grade. Sometimes you have gravel in the line like we talked about. So always a sewer scope. Next, always a meth test. Even new construction. It's not testing who's lived in the house, but who's worked in the house, who's walked through the house when it was unlocked. I have found at this point 3 new builds that had meth in them.
Oh
they
my
weren't
God.
screaming high, but they had meth in them. And
I mean, we had one where there was tinfoil where somebody was spoke stuff out.
Yeah.
But the house didn't test high, weirdly. I was shocked by that.
Yeah. Sometimes, and one of the more common houses that have meth in them are where grandparents have lived, and maybe they let a grandchild come stay with them that were maybe hard on their luck. Those houses are one of the more common ones to test positive for meth.
Yeah.
And then last, a radon test is a good idea. It's about 1 in 3 houses test high in Utah. It's also one of the ones that's less expensive to mitigate. So it's about $1,800 to mitigate a house for radon. And so if you are skipping one and you do have radon down the road that you test for later, it's not going to cost as much to fix. Where if you have meth, it's $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to decontaminate a house. Plus, then you have to repaint, then you have to get new carpet. And so that's expensive to fix. Sewer issues can be very expensive to fix. If you just have to clean a sewer line, that might only be, $500, $600, $700. But if you have to dig a line, it's going to be $3,000-$4,000 plus, up to $20,000-$30,000.
If it's under a driveway or something like that, and they got to dig up the driveway and
Everything. Yeah.
Nightmare.
Well, and dude, you have been such an invaluable resource for us because we've gone through so many inspections to get out of this point. When we're showing houses, it's super handy because we can know what we're looking for. And like certain ages of homes, to look for certain things. Houses built in the 80s and 90s, look for great pipe because then you're going to be $10,000, $15,000 out replacing pipes. What are some of so if you're looking at like an old home, say you're in downtown Salt Lake and you're looking at a house from like 1910 or 1890.
Sure.
What are some of the major things you're looking for on any given different age of home?
Sure. So older homes, let's say 1900 to 1930, 1940. So a lot of those are going to have galvanized plumbing. They all had galvanized plumbing originally. So I'm looking to see if those pipes are original. Galvanized will get rust and sediment that builds up. And you'll eventually get to where you have very low flow. You can get pinhole leaks. And so hopefully the galvanized plumbing has been fully replaced, not only inside the house, but also what feeds the house. Sometimes a house will get new plumbing inside, but you still have that old galvanized line that feeds the house. So that's something that I'm looking for. And that's something that if you're touring a house, you can glance in the mechanical room and look for any galvanized pipe. Older homes had ungrounded circuits.
Or knob and tube.
Knob and tube. And so knob and tube can be a fire hazard. It's also not grounded, and so it can be more of a shock hazard. And so with knob and tube, I recommend ideally rewiring. If it's a little later in time and it's just ungrounded, you don't necessarily have to rewire. You can add GFCI protection, and that gives you a lot of safety benefit.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry guys, I'm
great.
I love it.
I like Andrew.
Yeah, dude.
Okay, so this one is, I'm going to make it real personal here, real awkward for you. When agents are coming through for the inspection walkthrough with their buyers, which agents should be there, if your agent isn't showing up for your inspection walkthrough, you should be asking some questions of the agent. How much do you want us to be chipping in? Because I always try to be there and try and help, put things in context. I do always, fair warn, I'm going to tell you, I always warn my buyers, Andrew is going to scare the shit out of you. Because that's his job. I want him to give you the worst case scenario. I want him to scare you, and I want him to be thorough.
We even gave him a nickname, right?
Oh,
The deal breaker.
I call him the deal killer.
The deal killer.
I tell my client, I'd say, I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I tell my clients, I say, we lovingly refer to him as the deal killer.
Sure.
You want more information. It's his job to scare the shit out of you. And here's the deal. You'd rather have more information than less information, right?
And I'm not out to try to deal or to kill any deals by any means, but I do want people to know what they're getting. And I am thorough, and I pride myself in that. And I try to, put things in perspective so they know what's a bigger issue and what's not. But yeah, I'm very thorough.
Yeah.
So for us, how much do you want us to be chiming in during these inspection walkthroughs?
Sure. So a lot of the agents that I get referrals from, they've been through a lot of walkthroughs with me. And so oftentimes they'll sit back, they know what I'm going to present, and they know that I've checked everything.
And then there's me.
Well, it's good to ask questions and to shed light on things so that they're also understanding what these important things are, or what I call out constantly, and what's a smaller issue that you need to caulk this penetration or caulk around the toilet. Those are simple fixes and not something to get too hung up on.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably, at least for me, I know that's what I call it a little debrief after, where after you're done, I'll hang out on the curb with them or go get coffee after something and say, hey, for liability reasons, Andrew's not going to tell you that any of this stuff isn't a big deal or not to worry about it. And neither am I going to tell you. However, here are some items that are going to get called out. These ones are going to be more expensive,
Yep. Yeah.
Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And it's good for agents to be there to hear everything and how I present it. And then they also have a good idea of what the more important items are. And they're not left with the report, which has everything in it, which can be a little overwhelming. So it's nice to have that 30 or 40 minutes where I'm presenting it and talking about what the more important items are, what the more costly things might be.
Yeah. Does that get, whether the cameras are on for this question or not, this is just for my own thing, is that what is going through your head? I feel like half the time the buyers afterwards, they're like, okay, so which on here are the important things? Or is this really a big deal? And there's got to be some kind of mental gymnastics you're going through where it's like, okay, watch what you say.
Sure. Honestly, maybe less so than you'd think.
Okay.
Just because I've seen so many homes and presented the same thing so many times, I can see questions come up in certain areas of the home, and I can almost predict what they're about to ask. But I'll try to recap the more important items in the beginning of the walkthrough and also right at the end. And I think that's helpful for people because it helps drive it home.
Yeah, I always love that too, because sometimes buyers, myself included, get hung up on a specific thing for some reason because down the line 10 years ago they had a friend that this thing happened to.
Absolutely.
And so they'll get hung up on a GFC, or they'll get hung up on earthquake straps, or they'll get hung up on whatever, and it's like, but you've also got this polybutylene piping, and this is $200
fix versus
so I think it's always really helpful when you do that to kind of use the bread of the sandwich for the more important items, and that's always super helpful.
It's funny zeroing in on certain things because I'll inspect for some tradesmen and they're always super focused on their trade, and they know that this is a plumbing problem or this is an electrical problem, and so they'll be overly focused on one area and less so on others.
Yeah.
Fathers and father-in-laws.
I was going to ask that was my next question.
Should I bring my parents or my in-laws to the home inspection, or the whole family?
Yeah. I mean, by all means, bring people so that they can listen. The inspection is for the buyer, and so there are some dads that come along and they can be very helpful, and then there are some dads that come along and they can be not helpful, and they can steer things in directions that we don't need to go. We need to stay focused in the limited time that we have in the house. So bring them along, but maybe just
Tell them to shut up.
tell them to listen and come along for the ride, but.
And maybe make notes of questions if they've got them to hit you up with when they got the
think
report.
Sometimes these guests will come and they want to prove how much they know, and so they'll ask a lot of questions preemptively, and they're things that I'm going to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My favorite, we had one recently where an electrician came along. It was pretty great. I think the electrician was trying to impress
the buyers.
The buyer's mom.
Okay.
And so Andrew was talking about ungrounded electrical and GFI. And he went, well, GTO and GFI, how GFI works. And Andrew explained it. And the electrician then goes, well, no, actually. And then he said the exact same thing. Dude, you're just wasting our time. But okay, Joel, you had one more question that I think might be the funnest part of this.
Oh, horror stories? Is that one? Okay. So what are any things that, there are obvious things, like there was a picture of a new construction that was on your social media the other day where like the basement was flooding. But what are some things where it's like you go in and the house looks beautiful and maybe some hidden gems or horror stories of things that maybe buyers wouldn't see on the initial walkthrough, but holy hell.
Sure. And in addition to that, what's the gnarliest thing?
Yeah.
What are the gnarliest things you've seen, even that are obvious?
Yeah.
Sure. It's always unfortunate when a house gets flipped and it's purely cosmetic and you have, all the old electrical, all the old plumbing, which is now buried behind this beautiful kitchen, because the only way to get to a lot of that is to open drywall or to not have cabinets right there to be able to get to those systems. And so that's always an unfortunate one. I have found the sewer lines that were fully disconnected and draining into basically pits in the yard. That's crazy. And also it was crazy that it hadn't backed up.
It's more common than you would think, though.
My house, when I bought it,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've had that too.
Had a cesspool.
I had a very healthy rose garden.
Yeah.
Very, very healthy.
Luckily not a tomato garden.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Fried tomatoes.
Yeah.
Oh, that looks delicious.
Tomato taste.
Tomato.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the gnarliest thing? What's the grossest thing you've seen in an inspection? And this can be from your foreclosure days too.
I was in a house a couple of weeks ago, and behind their furnace there was a laundry standpipe. So it was where the washing machine drained into the drain in the wall, and the kitchen had been backing up through this washing machine standpipe, and so it had to have been backing up for at least a couple weeks, and so it was just disgusting in this basement, and there was things growing on the drywall and the soil. That was a pretty bad one.
Gross.
Sticky.
Dead animals.
I have found more than one dead cat in a crawl space.
Oh my gosh.
I was on a roof and I looked down a chimney one day, and there was a whole family of raccoons living in the chimney, cute little baby ones, and then one kind of a fat one.
Yeah.
I've had that in one of my listings before. That one's also surprisingly common.
Yeah.
Raccoons are sneaky.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, chimneys should have a spark screen and a rain cap, and that'll help prevent rain from getting into the chimney. It contains any sparks that are floating out, but also prevents animals like raccoons and squirrels from getting in your chimney.
Yeah.
I have two more questions. Oh, unless you have more horror stories.
No.
Okay. So as real estate agents, when we are having an open house or we know there's going to be a showing, we always try to say, make sure the house is as presentable as possible, whether that means baking cookies or making sure there's vacuum lines or whatever it is. What are some things that sellers should and can do before an inspection to both make your life easier as well as be presentable? Yeah.
Sure. So sometimes sellers don't realize that the buyer is coming at the end of the walkthrough or at the end of the inspection. And so it doesn't need to look nice for me. I don't care, and it doesn't change what I'm going to find. But do be aware that the buyer is going to come, so present the house in that way. But then also for the inspection, it's nice to move stored items away from the electrical panel, away from the attic hatch. I do get in the attic, and that can drop a little insulation. And so I do my best. I put down a little tarp, which catches a lot of it. But you need to move stored items away. Same with the electrical panel. I pull the cover off, and so you don't want to have boxes and stored items in front of the panel. It's helpful when the gates are unlocked. That way I'm not cutting through the house to go into the backyard multiple times. That's a helpful thing. It's best that pets be removed or kenneled. I know sometimes that's difficult, but I am going in and out carrying ladders or sewer scopes, and I certainly do my best. I'm not trying to let out any animals, but just for everybody's safety, the pet's safety, it's best that they be contained.
Awesome.
Thanks. And then, my real last question, how do you maintain this glorious mustache? How do I grow one? I want to.
I wish I knew the secret, and if I could do a full beard, I certainly would, but this is all I get. But I'm happy with it.
Awesome. I just want to say I learned so much every time I gone to a home inspection with you.
Thank you.
You point out stuff that I'm just like, oh, I should check that maintenance issue on my house, or that's where that smell is coming from. Or, I learn something every time.
Yeah.
Just following you around.
Yeah. And following on social media, which leads me to my second of the two questions. Do you have two top places in Salt Lake as far as meal presentation and signature cocktails?
Oh yeah. Man. Yeah, Andrew is the coolest of all of us by a long shot. Freaking HGTV house.
Yeah.
So best new cocktail lounge that I tried. They just opened a week ago, and I'm probably gonna get the name slightly wrong, but Brownstone 22 Brownstone. I'm sorry I confused it, but it was great.
Awesome.
Just tried it. It was fantastic.
Cool.
Great food as well.
Awesome. Have you been to Shalene's place?
No.
Melancholy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's
Really good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good friend owns that place, and it's such a vibe.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Now for mains, restaurant style, like the presentation, the pictures of your food. I'm always like, oh my gosh, I want to frame that and put it in my house.
I don't know. I think sometimes my favorite meal is just to throw something on the Traeger and
Nice. Into it.
Nice. All right. Well, I don't want to hold you up. I know you got a couple of inspections today, so I'll wrap it up. But
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you
JODA
guys.
Home Inspections, Andrew Jolley, he's the man. And look up JODA Home Inspections on Instagram.
As always, don't get fucked over. Hire a professional.
Amen. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, that was great. That was good.